then finally, before I pass it over to our wonderful host tonight, just wanted to introduce Discover Nikkei, which is a project of the Japanese American National Museum. And it's an international community-based web project. It has major funding from the Nippon Foundation and was launched in 2005. And the site is in 4 languages: English, Japanese, Spanish, and Portuguese. And we publish news stories daily from around the world, not just the US. Like, it is a very global project. So you can find more on discovernikkei.org. And you can also submit your own stories and articles. You can find more information on the website. So with that, I think that I covered all the points. And so I'm going to pass it over to Traci Kato-Kiriyama, who will be our host and will be guiding you through the rest of the evening. Take it away, Traci.
Thanks, Joy. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited about tonight's program. For my sake, I'm going to put us on gallery view so I can actually see faces. But there we go. That's much better. It's really lovely to be here with all of you. My name is Traci Kato-Kiriyama. My pronouns are they and she. You can call me TKK. I am the curator for the Nikkei Uncovered, a poetry column for Discover Nikkei. We started in December of 2016, and our inaugural poets were Hiroshi Kashiwagi and Amy Uematsu. Did not want to start without those two. And we've been going now for almost 5 years. We have 53 columns. We have featured over 100 artists, writers, poets, writers of different genres and kinds, but, you know, sort of in the poetic form. And tonight is our 2nd annual reading, like Joy mentioned. And so we wanted to think about it in maybe a different way than what I'm used to with poetry readings. And Sochi Julissa Bermejo did a series at Beyond Baroque that she would match us up with different poets in pairs. And I had the pleasure of doing that series. And so I think that was an original inspiration for this tonight. And I think also, you know, what I was saying earlier to the poets is that I think through our art, we can have conversation in a really deep and meaningful and also efficient manner. We get to know each other rather quickly through our art, even in short pieces, and that's the idea of Nikkei Uncovered. We really do an uncovering, I think, when we dive into our art and our storytelling. So that's what we're here for tonight, is to uncover sort of the layers of what we even mean by these things that we call ourselves: artist, writer, poet, Nikkei, you know, all these things, right? So I'm super happy to have 3 amazing pairs of folks. In no particular order, we are just going to go right in. And we have featured all of these folks in past columns. And next week's Thursday column, the monthly column, is going to feature these first 2 tonight, Sho and Paulette. So look out for that. It always comes out the 3rd Thursday of the month, and we will be featuring some of their poetry. We'll also be putting in the chat information about all of these folks, so please stay up with them in their work. They do a lot of really incredible work in the world, and so we would love for you to engage with every single one of them. So I'm going to be reading the bios for the pair. We'll send it off to the pair for their set of 15 minutes, however they want to use that, and then I'll read the bios for the next pair, and so on. Then we'll come back, we'll have some time for a little bit of Q&A. We'll take in some of your questions if there's time. And I'm gonna offer up 2 writing exercises for you to take with you tonight. We're gonna hang on for an extra 10 minutes for any of you who wanna actually start writing. And we'll provide that space and some music, and that'll be the evening. So again, thank you for joining us. Our first pair. So as a writer, Sho's creative practice is grounded in a diasporic Shimanchu islander consciousness. He is committed to cultivating space to tell difficult and complicated stories in hopes of dismantling the separation and stagnation that informed the world he was born into. His grandmother's family immigrated to the Los Angeles area from Taminato, a village in the Yambaru rainforest in northern Okinawa. His grandfather's family emigrated from Buzen-shoe, Fukuoka, to Tlingit territory, settling in Juneau, Alaska. Currently, Sho resides on the Kwangin and Wasanich territory, Victoria, British Columbia. Sho, it's awesome to have you. Paulette Moreno, or Moreno, is a civil rights leader, poet, musician, speaker, and current Grand President of the Alaska Native Sisterhood. Her ancestry is Japanese, Hispanic, and Alaska Native of the Tlingit Nation. Paulette was born near Mount Edgecombe, a volcano in Sitka, Alaska. Her grandfather, George Miyasato Sr., and her uncle, George Miyasato Jr., were incarcerated during World War II. She is working with her mother, Harriet Miyasato Belil, to find healing from the racism and discrimination her family experienced during the war and in the years that would follow because of their Native and Japanese heritage. So without further ado, Sho and Paulette, thank you so much.
はい、最後よ。ワンネショヤイ。ワンネウチナオンセヤイ。ウヤファフジウジミカルチャビタン。ユタシクお願い。If you send to the white man, you might tell the story like this. We are so proud that our ancestors came to this continent as hardworking fishers and stoic farmers in the face of brilliant white hatred. If you send to the cosmos, you might tell the story like this. In other words, we came into someone else's earth body with no permission to harness and take ownership of land and resources to build lives of empire and concrete. I start with these words because I was born into a Japanese American identity and not realizing that when I say I'm Japanese and American, I'm calling on two empires. And I think that a lot of the work and places that I call on and was shown didn't necessarily take that into account. And so I begin with words in Uchinaguchi, which isn't necessarily my ancestors' language, but is the main language of the island of Okinawa, to acknowledge that the Okinawans who have come through histories of incarceration and to say that we still exist and we are still here, and that those histories have been silenced or perhaps made to sleep, but they are coming back alive. And I also call upon, the histories of America and ask, right now, I can't help but think about the bombs that are falling on Gaza and think about sort of the settler colonialism that informs our lives, and how when we tell our Japanese American histories, we often don't acknowledge the land or the places that we've come into. And so the indigenous nations, their sovereignty and agency is sort of destroyed in the stories that we tell. And so as an Okinawan who understands in a Japanese context how painful that can be and how much work it can be to hold these histories, I constantly am thinking through what it means to tell my story and what it means to plant my feet on this ground, on Wasanich territory, Lekwungen territory today, but also in all the places that my ancestors came through. And I think the incarceration became a place that was told as Japanese American, which didn't leave space for my ancestors who weren't Japanese American. And so, I went up to Alaska to sort of make sense of some of my ancestors who came from Fukuoka. And I met Paulette, and I think for the first time there was sort of an unspoken bond, because there was an understanding that the people that were affected by the Japanese American incarceration were not just Japanese. And so, through our relationship, she has sort of become a mirror for understanding how to breathe life back into those ancestors who were not given space and who are not sort of provided in the normative histories and the dominant histories I was given. And I think part of that work has been to realize that, we tell stories where we've been harmed, but we're also capable of harming. And that was something that was more difficult to find and to rethink. And so I'm super grateful for Paulette, because, through her teachings and her understandings, I could understand what it meant for my ancestors to come to Tlingit territory. And I'm still learning, and it's not a finished job, but it was to say that I had a deeper understanding that the land that we came to was not blank. It was actually other people's land and still is. And so that's an ongoing work process. And I think that as Japanese Americans, it's from that time of migration to the many jobs we held that were based on resources and extraction from land, and the incarceration and the resettlement, and all the time in our sort of upward climb since then. This has all happened and is happening on the homelands of other people who we don't even necessarily always know how to speak with or acknowledge. And so Paulette has been a entry point into rethinking my world. And so I'm super grateful for the knowledge and wisdom that she's passed on to me. And so I'll pass it over to her right now to share some words.
Gunakshish, arigato and gracias show. I'm of my mother's people, the Hlinedi, Raven Dog Salmon from the village of Alquan, from the part of the universe that we refer to as the Big Dipper House. I'm a child of the Kagwantan, the Eagle people. My Tlingit name is Shkunyek. My Japanese name for my great-grandfather is unknown to this day. It floats in the universe at this time because my Japanese grandfather and Sho's Japanese grandfather were here in Tlingit Ani, land of the Tlingit people. I come to you today from Shikakwan, Sitka, Alaska, Shikakwan, the ancestral homeland of the clans from this area, of which I will always be a visitor because I am an Alquan woman, which is from the Juneau area. We are all visitors of the land on which we stand at this time, in which we breathe the very air. There is DNA from tens of thousands of years ago, right beneath your feet, going through your eyes, to every cell in your hair, to every beat of your heart. At this time, like yin and yang, the raven and the eagle, the crow and the wolf, creating balance is understanding shadow and light. Creating balance is understanding that through the greatest darkness, you will know the brilliance of the heavens. You will only have light if you know how bright it is. You will only have darkness if you know how far your journey of your heart and being can become. Balance is taking light and darkness and mixing them together into medicine so that you can journey into these worlds. Show and all of our guests who are here with us today. We are not only these bodies of bones, we are these bodies of great spirit and great light, of torment, of hurt. We are these intellectual bodies of the universes, of the heavens, like my grandfather Kamichi Miyasato would share as we were little children at his feet. How long ago he was. We never stepped on Japanese soil that he came from. Yet somehow his footprint are in our hearts. through everything that we ate, that he cooked, through everything he said, through every tear that went. Balance is healing and going back into places and gently adding love, forgiveness, compassion, and understanding, but always knowing the strength that you are from. It's like beating a necklace, one bead at a time, light and darkness, 5 beads of darkness, 2 beads of light. Where are we now? Where is our world? What is the voices of our grandfathers and our grandmothers when they were in barbed wire places? Rip off those barbed wires, show, and everyone. We don't live in those places. We only visited them. We will stand strong again and have faith. I am a Tlingit woman. I am a Japanese woman. I'm a Hispanic woman and a human being. And I am with you today. Gunashish.
And when our groves of ancestral memory are overgrown and thick with debris, winding vines, clinging to the graves of loved ones, cloaking them in darkness, and when I lose the ritual, prayers left unsaid, and when I memorize and repeat a dead practice, and the anthropologist, the commander, and the tourist learn and loot ways. And when distance is a machete, severing me from where I feel I should be, or could be, or might have been. Still, amidst all of this, our ritual will contort and transform and falter and expand. Something new must awaken. Absence precedes presence. Death needs life. Energy can be sent wherever, whenever, and however. Even if I am too weak to lift a finger or prepare a meal, too confused to remember the way home, always intention will lead the way.
From my mother, Harriet Miyasato Belil, she spoke these words.
Let me turn it down.
The other day, I felt a tear come down my face. It was part of an unshed tear I had suppressed for many years. It was the denial of these tears, refusing to let my feelings be known. Now I feel a stirring inside of me like a dam overflowing, and I let the rest of my unteared tears flow freely from my dad and my brother George. How terrible it must have been to be prisoners of war during World War II, simply because they were Japanese. Flee from me, you who have tormented me all of these years. You no longer have power over me, for I am healing myself spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, as I tell my story of my unshed tears that cease to exist. As her daughter, Mama, Mama, where has your soul gone? I asked as she slipped away 7 or 8 decades ago. In moments she'd go to visit her child within, you know, the one with rice paper skin and Tlingit salmonberry lips. Mama, Mama, let's go together. I'm ready for the trip. I have rolled 2 courages, and I've rolled them up and packed them up like seaweed for hunger to fuel your body, memories. What hurts so much, little mama? I want you to come back brilliant, like Big Dipper stars and shimmering northern lights. So we went to her place of scary race hate. We saw and spoke to those feelings with big boots and wire hands that held her hostage. And we said, no more. Unhand her. Give her over. We are her people. And she floated back like raven wings and eagle down, softly landing, and the good earth held her up. Take her home. And her drenched, tear-skinned face cleared up like a cloud being chased over the ocean away, and her spirit found the salmon, the halibut, the cod to play. Little Harriet is back and brilliantly unearthed, feeling feisty like the courage that we packed up in a seaweed-wrapped package. Oh, sacred keeper of space, I see you clothed in leaves as she's walked up the shore, gray and white rocks, shells and pearls at her feet. My mama became my mother, and she renewed her ocean of native abalone shine and the Japanese hues of blue herring grace by dropping that unshed tear into the ocean's teacups. And today, mother and daughter play.
I think one of the most important things of writing has been to restore emotional complexity to ancestors. I think oftentimes people are given one sort of story in one place. And so I'll read one short poem from my great-grandmother. Her thighs made of daikon flesh, the bitterness of 5 children pickling her skin with wrinkles, stifled bursts of green life springing from the crown of her forehead. She awakens every morning rooted on the hill above the city, her anger rising and falling with the contours of the bay, the thick white trunk of her body a wand to unleash torrential rains and call forth the coldest, most silent of nights. For fearful men, her ocean eyes a vigilant mirror. In the longest night of the year, she sent her youngest son down to the docks where he slipped into the water silently, possessed by dreams of octopus embracing him, slippery seals and barnacles growing thick on his throat. The newspaper said his body was never found. In a fit of mourning, she began hacking away at her thighs, making a giant broth of bones, hurling herself into the boiling water, seething in pain, the heat turning her translucent as she began to melt away. Thank you very much.
Goodness.
Thank you so much, Sho. Thank you so much, Paulette. I'm going to actually ask everybody to unmute themselves and show appreciation audibly. It was really beautiful. Thank you, folks, or show your reactions.
It was so good. It's beautiful. It was so beautiful.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for your weavings, for the light and dark, for the floating, for the wings. Thank you for giving emotional complexity to our ancestors. Thank you for placing us with you. So that was very much appreciated. So much gratitude. We're going to come back to you as we get into some conversation later. I think I'll be asking everybody pretty much the same process, same questions about process, your process in coming to these pieces and these sharings. So yeah, let's keep moving it forward. I am really, again, honored to introduce this next pair. They share space in a class that Amy Uematsu has been leading since 2015, which is a very unique experience, I think, for any writing group. So I'm going to read these 2 bios. Miya Iwataki's life experiences as a poet, writer, host and producer of East Wind Radio Series, designer of diversity and cultural competency programs for LA County, NCRR fighter for Japanese American reparations, one of 30 women sponsored by United Nations NGO to UN Decade for Women Convention in Nairobi, Kenya, and co-author of the first study on cultural barriers to reproductive health care in 8 API communities, have shaped a lifelong understanding, awareness, and commitment to justice and equity. It has breathed life into the importance of valuing cultural beliefs, practices, and traditions in health and in our daily lives, and an appreciation for how deeply language is tied into and reflects our culture. Amy Uematsu is a Sansei poet from Pasadena and Sierra Madre. She has 5 published poetry collections, the most recent being Basic Vocabulary. Amy co-edited the widely used UCLA anthology, Rooks, an Asian American reader. Recent essays appear in Flashpoints for Asian American Studies and Mountain Movers, Student Activism and the Emergence of Asian American Studies. Amy taught public high school math for 32 years, and currently she leads a writing workshop at the Far East Lounge in Little Tokyo. Without further ado, folks, Miya and Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Miya is, well, it's interesting because Miya and I knew each other way back in the late 60s, early 70s, when the Asian American movement was getting started in LA. And then our paths went different ways. And then back in 2015, all of a sudden we find ourselves in the same writing group. So it's been really great for me to be with Miya, and we have other women who are in our group that are very active in the community. And I think what makes our group special is that when we get together, it's not just poetry, but we kind of have similar political views. And because we were getting started right during all those Trump years, we always have had plenty to talk about, right, Miya?
Right.
Yeah. So we'd kind of talked about what we're each going to read. So I'm going to be reading first because one of my poems is going to lead into something that Miya's going to read. And I thought I would, did you want to say anything more about our workshop first, Miya?
No, you covered it pretty well. Although I just want to say that what started off as a writer's workshop has turned into a support group.
Yes.
That we look forward to. And, you know, we've worked through, you know, deaths, births, illness,
Right.
you know, pandemics, and it's turned into something very wonderful.
Oh, and then we call ourselves WOW. And actually Miya thought of this, Women Word Warriors. So we call ourselves the WOW group. All right, so I wanted to start by celebrating all the poets here and all the poets in the audience. I read this poem quite often, and I usually, well, I'd like to dedicate it to Gil Scott-Heron, who was a great songwriter, jazz musician, and political poet. And I don't know, it's one of those things. Today, I happened to find out that he's going to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. So that was kind of cool. And they consider him an early influencer of hip hop. This is called On Poets. A poet carries the unseen seed for a long time. A poet is both mother and father, collecting bones, leaves, and names with equal anticipation. A poet is most amazed by the gift of countless moments of amazement. A poet walks on a tightrope of syllables. A poet keeps writing no matter how dangerous. An advocate for the ordinary, a poet can be no less than revolutionary. Feared most by tyrants, a poet cannot hide. A poet begins with nothing and ends with everything over and over again. A poet inhabits the crowded country of dream and desire, improvising her small portion of words like a jazz musician. A poet sings because it's the only way she knows how. A poet keeps giving birth to herself. So to all the poets here and to Gil Scott Heron. For some reason, I've been able to write during the pandemic. I know other people say they've really had trouble writing, but I haven't had any trouble. And so the next two poems were written fairly recently. This first piece is a series of very short, you might say almost like haiku, but not quite. They're called lunes. And each stanza consists of 3 words, 5 words, and 3 words. And I wrote this on our most recent 4th of July, but I call this Viral Briefs for the Farce of July. COVID-19 reminder, racism, a more deadly virus, our country's tradition. Peaceful crowd gasped so a criminal can pose, Bible in hand. What is freedom? To be American and Black and never know. Reverend Sharpton's reminder, 400 years of America's knee on Black necks. Civil War aftermath, Confederate flags, torches, white hoods, never put away. A dangerous disease could not stop we millions chanting George Floyd. Meanwhile, Trump's wall, children still locked in jails, families denied asylum. Kung flu mentality, a convenient excuse to attack our Asian Americans. Mount Rushmore monuments, all for President's shameful treatment of indigenous tribes. Even these lies in our Declaration of Independence, quote, merciless Indian savages, unquote. Yes, white justice was never meant for all, an empty pledge. Gotta keep marching, taking it to the streets, stand up, united. And I think many of us here agree it's really important for all the groups to unify and resist and get together. All right, so this last poem I'm reading was written actually 2 weeks before the Atlanta shootings. And in March of this year, there were a reported 3,800 anti-Asian hate crimes. This poem happened to be in the latest column that Traci curates. It's called When All They Can See Is Our Eyes. 60 years ago, I knew the danger of walking past white kids my age who would sneer and glare and pull up their eyes. Still so young, I was relieved if they didn't also yell Jap or Chink. In World War II propaganda, Americans were told how to differentiate loyal Chinese citizens from treacherous Japanese, like my California-born parents locked up in camps. How to Spot a Jap, a US Army pamphlet in comic book style, explaining that C's eyes have a marked squint, while J has eyes slanted toward his nose. In 2020, the pandemic brought our eyes to the forefront again, as President Trump kept blaming anyone Asian, proclaiming the China virus or even Kung flu. No coincidence, we soon became scapegoats, strangers yelling, "Go back to China" when we're Korean, infecting and disgusting, though Filipino or Thai. In 2021, COVID still raging, A Sacramento teacher lectures via Zoom. If your eyes go up, you're Chinese, she gestures. If they go down, they're Japanese. As the racist bullying now escalates to our elders, a grandmother assaulted and robbed at an ATM, an 84-year-old fatally smashed to the ground by a 19-year-old. To those who insist making slanty eyes is harmless fun, can't you Asians take a joke? Whether Miley Cyrus or Houston Astro Yuli Gurriel. No such thing as a little racism. So-called innocent teasing and taunts transforms in an instant to this all too familiar avalanche of hate, where attacking us for our Asian eyes is as American as Japs must go signs, slanted vagina insults, the Chinese Exclusion Act as far back as 1882. Okay, Mia.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take us back a little bit. Back in the day when we used to have house parties, we used to have dances in the high school gym, playing oldies but goodies, and the favorite was Smokey. By the way, Bob Dylan, when asked who his favorite poet was, said Smokey Robinson. Ooh, Smokey, silky, soft, and sensuous, a vibrato tasting of honey sliding down my throat. Sing, Smokey. Come and get these memories of chaperone dances and dudes with slick-back pompadours wearing Sir Guy shirts and freshly ironed khakis. Hot cars, the color of my tube of candy apple red lipstick, slipping and sliding between the chubby folds of naga hide, tucked and rolled in the back seat of his Chevy 409, parked in the high school gym. Tight curls, tighter skirts, and teardrop earrings, waiting for that fine, superfine dude to gangster pimp over and cop a dance when they play Smokey. Sweaty, slow grinds with the lights turned low, soft French kisses in the shadows of the high school gym. Sing, Smokey. Smokey, you're my man. You know, I wrote this poem a couple of years ago, but I am dedicating it to Julie Lee, who was nominated for Best Featured Actress in a Play at the 2021 Ovation Awards. And they had her name mispronounced and the wrong photo shown. And I think one thing that the Black Lives Movement has reminded us is the importance and power of saying their name. Our name is important. Hello, my name is Miya, M-I-Y-A. You're Japanese, so please don't call me Miwa. It's Miya. No, I'm not Miye. That's someone else. I am Miya. My name is Miya, spelled M-I-Y-A. Yes, that's the correct spelling. It's a Japanese name. That's how we Japanese spell it. I don't know what it looks like to you. It's not Maya. It's Miya, Miya. Yes, yes, like Mama Mia. Ha ha, that's very funny. Never heard that one before. No, you did it again. My name is Miya. not Maya. Yes, like Mamma Mia, real funny. No, I'm not missing in action. Ha ha. Never heard that one either. No, you wrote it wrong again. It's not spelled M-A-Y-A, it's Mia. M as in Mary, I as in ice, Y as in you dumb motherfucker, A as in apple. Oh, now you want to know my last name? Less than 2 months ago, a white male, 21 years old with a sex addiction, shot and killed 8 people at 3 Asian spas in Georgia. Names of the victims were not released for several days. Authorities would not confirm that these killings were racially motivated hate crimes. Bullets over Georgia. Bullets pierced the mall. White shooter in Georgia. 6 Asian women dead. Shattered lives strewn like shards of splintered glass windows. No bulletproofing. 6 Asian women dead. I'm struggling against a rising torrent of feelings, rage, fear, frustration, grief, and yes, hate. I am drowning, straining, treading water, breathing oxygen into lungs filling with hate for white supremacy. Malcolm X called them white devils. The term echoes, slamming into the walls of my stomach. On March 16th, attacks at 3 Asian spas in Georgia. 6 Asian women dead. Invisible background to the narrative, the national narrative, a media mantra of the shooter, his name, age, sex addiction, called a suspect, though he confessed. Yesterday was really a bad day for him, and this is what he did, police say. Was there racial bias? The FBI asks. 3 Asian spas, 6 Asian women dead, shrouded by the media invisibility cloak that covers the Asian community. Say their names. Soon Chung Park, age 74. Hyun Chung Grant, age 51. Soon Cha Kim, age 69. Young E Yu, age 62. Xiao Jie Ton, age 49. Dao Yo Feng, age 44. Say their names. Their names, no longer invisible. Say all their names. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's go ahead. Let's please unmute, show appreciation audibly through the chat, through all the memes. Thank you so much for your power, your fierceness, your words, your weavings together. So I can see how much there's probably just so much that's so fruitful because of the conversation of a group that's writing at the same time and talking about things. So really powerful. Please give us information about the group if you're open to more writers in it. Leave that in the chat for us. It'd be awesome. We're coming to our last pair. Very excited to introduce this family pair, family pairing. Mariko Fujimoto Rooks is a rising senior at Yale, where she double majors in the history of science, medicine, and public health, and ethnicity, race, and migration, and is additionally enrolled in the combined BA MPH program at the Yale School of Public Health. At Yale, she writes for Juk songs, Yale's Asian American spoken word group, and is a two-time All-American nominated water polo player. Mariko is also a member of the National USA Water Polo Diversity and Inclusion Task Force and will serve as the next JACL Eastern District Council Youth Representative. She is also the Arts and Intersectionality Lead for Changing Women Collective, a literary journal and arts platform designed for and by women and non-binary BIPOC women and femmes. Raised in Culver City, California, Mariko is also a longtime member of Japanese American community institutions such as Kizuna, Senshin Buddhist Temple, and LABCC's Camp Morningstar. Dr. Curtis Takada Rooks is Program Coordinator of Asian Pacific American Studies and Assistant Professor at Loyola Marymount University, whose research addresses ethnic and multiracial community and identity. He also serves on the U.S.-Japan Council Board of Directors, Japan America Society of Southern California, Board of Governors, and is a member of both the West Los Angeles Japanese American United Methodist Church and Senshin Temple Adult Buddhist Association, also known as SABA. His current research interests focus on global Nikkei identity, the role of multiracial Japanese Americans in US-Japan relations, and reappropriation of self-naming among mixed-race Japanese in Japan. So all the words, all the things coming out to just greet you here and welcome you all. So everybody, Mariko and Curtis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. And thank you so much to everyone who read their incredible work thus far. We're so honored to share this space with you. As TKK mentioned, my name is Mariko, and above me is my dad. This poem that we created is about my father's parents, who are right there in that picture frame. And we originally started working on this actually because of a class that I was in this past fall on Asian diasporas. And as a lot of the Jukson's members, which as Tracy mentioned, we're the Asian American spoken word group at Yale. We're naturally in this Asian diasporas class. So we asked if we could write a series of poems for this final project. And my dad and I have been toying with writing something together for some time now. So we decided that this was the moment to do it. And TKK so graciously also published it in Discover Nikkei. So that's what we'll be reading today. Before we get started, we just want to give a content warning for war and violence in the following poem, and also to acknowledge that the tradition of spoken word is a long-held Black oral history tradition that our family draws upon as generational African Americans. And so we want to take time to make space for that as well. Also, we are from Tongva land in Culver City, California, though I'm currently on Quinnipiac land in New Haven, Connecticut. Okay, do you want to add anything?
I wonder. Gotemba will always be the sound of rain falling on my mother's tin roof.
In the space between one port and another, they say the water has memory.
But a child wonders about those shores.
Wonders if she woke up to morning mist sliding off ramshackled sidings and patchwork roofs, if she felt the weight of English thick like years and oceans on her tongue when missionary school teachers began curving her space, the teeth between L's and R's. A grandchild wants to ask God.
After fire boiled yellow skin and youth in swimming pools,
what prayer did you hold in your mouth? 2 years away, the tide spits up men coated in algae green, and the fourth son of a deaconess with skin the genmai cha color of chocolate bars is tasked to dig the ashes of paper houses out of faces and sidewalks.
Wilmington and Yokohama, strung together with laundry lines in the afternoon sunlight, with every family scurrying home to create meals with leftovers from the market. A son wonders if a father was used to putting things back together in places where life and war sounded like home. in chops of wood and furrows of garden soil? Did you see a world that looked like yours?
They say that two people lock eyes across a crowded room, but a family is more interested in spines.
Atop one, a young woman stands a head taller than her peers. The other, tucking joy into tightly curled hair to withstand the passage of the sea. Both standing erect in the face of slights and derision, carved around the chances in each other's smiles. Love.
Revolution.
Reinscribes hardship into hope.
Vertebrae by vertebrae.
A Viet Cong soldier turns and runs from the image of a wife's slanted face, imprinted in the pistol barrel against a husband's forehead.
When that moment lets him return home, is mercy the sharp scent of Kansas grass breaking under his boots as he walks out the door again?
Is this what they mean by American opportunity?
50 years later, a child in the shape of a granddaughter flies on a Shinkansen, hears next stop Yokohama, and knows what it means that bullets remember. Their echoes ask questions. What if your love wasn't the bristle of a patchwork blanket against my cheek, your touch, the smooth velvet seats of a dark green Camry, your voice, the air arcing shut in the wake of the front door behind my father, hanging in the silence like an half-remembered words after an exhale before he boards another plane to find you.
Flying an ocean away. A father wonders about dreams that bullets don't allow us to forget. I wonder what dreams she saw when she first held her grandchild. I wonder about my father, who died too soon to share them.
On a cold December day, a granddaughter writes memories.
One.
Our two long arms dangling out of sweater sleeves, pressed against the slantings of your son's eyes when they smile.
Two.
My uncle's false teeth floating in electric water, the color of your teal hospital room walls.
Three.
Me on black-shoed tiptoes over the gaping mouth of a casket. You can close it now. It's time for her to sleep. Four.
Your children.
And your children's children.
Wondering.
Their way home. Thank you.
Oh my God, so good.
Okay, so I'm seeing that we only have about 2 minutes left. So Tracy, we can actually go ahead and turn it back over to you, or we can read more stuff.
Go check something else.
Mariko, I know I just announced that you write for a spoken word group at Yale. I think you've got some things in your arsenal.
All right.
And you're all done with your thesis, right? This is time to celebrate. So
I'm one down, one to go. One down, one to go. But I can go ahead and pull up something else real fast. Okay. Thank you all for listening to the first piece. This is going to be a classic diaspora piece about my name. What a shock. All right, here we go. Every poem starts with a text from my mother. You still write in passive voice. I'm glad to see college hasn't beaten the Japanese out of you. Mama, I remember my Japanese, or at least that I am of a language my tongue can barely wield every time someone says my name. I can't forget 3/4 of where I come from. Every time teachers trip over a school attendance list, there is no hiding my slanted eyes behind resumes or LinkedIn profiles. My mangled syllables make every doctor's office a crime scene. No one can stop looking at colonizer tongues splayed across the void of the white waiting room, coating the sanitized polychrome seats with the split wreckage of short vowels and rolled R's, and suddenly I'm the criminal instead of the victim, even though it is my name being massacred, even though it is my name that adorns the high-tech Tokyo skyscrapers of my murder victims. Yet, every time I gather up pages of pictures bound in barbed wire and desert skies, my father reminds me that in his textbooks, there was one line about the camps. In my high school history class, we were upgraded to half a page, to one picture of small hands grasping barbed wire that barely scratched the surface, of babies drowning in oily water, their blood dripping on indigenous land. Mothers are so frightened of birthing their children in this post-apocalyptic wasteland that they hold their offspring deep inside their bellies until their insides are sliced open. There are no pictures of these children in my textbooks, just the multi-million-dollar movies of my dystopia that make reparations a drop in this golden sea of silence. And all I can think is, how can we exist in your future if we don't exist in your past? You know, we can start taking hostages again, like Tule Lake in 44, since you like that kind of action. I already take a hostage every time I force someone to say my name, and I already am taken hostage every time my name is said, and every time there are no survivors. But somehow you knew, Mama, that every time I say my name, Mariko, true home, that is exactly where it brings me. Thank you.
December 7th, 1941, the day that lives in infamy, created me. You see, my body was not meant to be, but inevitable nonetheless. Born of nation-state dominance, of the aftermath of violence, of occupation, born of curiosity, of intrigue, of rebellion, born of desire, born of love, born of hope. My body is America. My body is Japan. My body is Black America. My body is Nikkei America. My body is yellow. My body is black. My body is caramel. My body, with all its complications and contradictions, with all its recriminations and reconciliation, with all its wonder. My body was not meant to be, but inevitable nonetheless.
Please unmute. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Good job.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Mariko. Curtis. Let's bring back all of the poets. And if we can spotlight everybody, all 6 of the poets. Are we all here? Almost.
Amy.
There we go. One last time, everybody, unmute and let's give this whole group appreciation, gratitude, props. So wonderful. I was going to have a bunch of different questions. I think that to honor time and everything, I really want, and this is always an interesting question, I think that people always wonder about is process. So I'm going to throw that out to all of you. You know, I think my main question right now is, how do you write? What is it that brings you to the page? There are so many stories, memories, things that need excavation, right? Things that need a light. But there are always things that we're not necessarily going to write about. And it's a precious time sometimes that we have to place ourselves in the space to create and to write. So I wonder if you could sort of address that question. What brings you to the page? And how has that possibly shifted or not in, say, the past year? Anyone can speak.
No, I'm the pedestrian social scientist here, who sort of plays in poetry because it allows me to express those things that social science won't, right? And so it allows me to tap into the wonderings of my own mind, and how possibly I came to be.
And I think for me, with sort of a background and an interest in public health and in sort of understanding how we process things and how we understand ourselves, for me, poetry has always been an outlet to be able to do that. And it has been something that I've also been able to do in community. So being able to work together to heal and to heal through articulating our own stories when we often don't have them heard or said by other people is something that always really draws me to that. And during quarantine, especially, being able to just write over Zoom was a huge part of keeping me grounded.
You know, for me, I'm thinking of a lot of things. I might write a poem based on a mood, an image, a word I've heard, a conversation. But I think through all of it, I think I'm using poetry as a way to connect to the world, to other people, to myself. It's really been a good way to make connection. And then just as a little aside, currently I'm really pissed off at what's going on in this country. And when I first started writing poetry in the late 60s and 70s, I was really angry about racism too. So it's kind of interesting that anger has also been a big energizer for a lot of my writing.
You know, I can really relate to that, Amy, because I think we were talking maybe a couple of weeks ago. I have had a hard time writing during the pandemic, and I find that I'm just so angry all the time. In fact, the past 4 years, I just couldn't believe what was happening. And so when I'd write, it would be, you know, I reach a point where I'm so angry, it just has to blurt out and pour out. And I think you can do powerful work that way, but it's not disciplined. And I want to reach a point where I can write when I'm not angry or when I'm not feeling, you know, some deep emotion. And I'd like to learn from you other poets here. How do you do that?
Joy, thank you for the question. To our audience who are before us, I write because my mother, I have seen her brilliance dim. I have seen her tears. I've seen her at 80 years old go back to 6 years old. And I wanted to try to explore that pain with her, but also the celebration of her. And I also write because, as mentioned, I am a Tlingit woman and Japanese and Hispanic. But growing up here in Alaska, it's been really powerful being an Indigenous woman and even witnessing today that the Japanese people are acknowledging the Indigenous land of which your feet stand on is powerful. And I'll probably write about that. It's going to sheesh. Thank you for that. That's something that sometimes is overlooked. And I think I write because you know, it's a lot of feelings, it's a lot of honesty, it's a lot of movement in the air, and we should write because we are of this land and of this place and of this time. Thank you for the question.
Could I add one more thing? The other reason I write is my daughter Mariko. I'm of a generation where men were not taught to feel or not to express feelings. And in this way, I could share my life and who I was with her, and that those things that shaped me. And similarly, there's a number of my students who are in the audience. And one of the things I've always say to them, no matter what you read, the first question you should ask of it is, what does it make you feel? And so I write for them too.
And to that end, I think, being inspired by that has been something that has really governed my entire life, and being around that. So very privileged to have that in the house.
I think for me, the ancestors asked for very specific work to be done. And so writing is a way to carry out that work. It's almost like a way to transform the relations. I mean, if we truly understand time as a spiral, and so that we're, can be in communication with very disparate times and spaces, like writing is a way to reorient and allow what was not perhaps able to be done at another time to happen now. I also think it's like it's almost like you're walking through water and it's a stone to put on so you can keep making the next step. And so I very much see it as a very practical, prophecy in a very humble way of where I'm trying to go. And so a poem will lead me to what I need. And so I am quite selfish when I write, because if I don't need to read it, then it's not going to be very helpful for me. And I think that that's reclaiming that selfishness is good, because I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. So.
Absolutely.
May I add one thing?
Oh, yes, please.
That I don't just write when I'm angry. I love music, and I wish I had a beautiful voice. And poetry to me is a way that of making music. Mm-hmm. And I think that poetry brings out rhythm and song, and as others have said, memories and honoring of their ancestors and their families, and it synthesizes things down to the essence, and that's something that in my personal life I'm trying to work more on that.
And I just wanted to shine a light on that comment about selfishness. I think that it's being generous to self, right? To allow ourselves to just dive in and show, and everybody, I think you all actually practice that, right? Taking the time, and sometimes it can be scary too, to even if we're charged up and writing from an angry and emotional place, it's labor. It still is labor, and it can be scary. It can be scary to show up to the table, as much as we know it can be a release. So I thank you for that. I thank you for all the generosity. I'd love to see if there are some questions from the community. Let's see if Joy is sending me something, and let me see if I can. Oh, here we go. From Eileen Ramos. To all of you, what underrated book do you recommend? Knowing that there are way too many that are, maybe not known and shared or forgotten, just top of mind, if you all have one underrated book that you might recommend at this moment.
I don't think it's underrated, but either the two books of Christine Kitano, her works of poetry, I think are incredible.
I think if you're looking for good sort of younger Indigenous poetry, I'd absolutely recommend my lovely colleague and friend Kinsale Houston, who is a National Youth Poet Laureate, and I can drop her website in here as well.
If I may, I come from a long line of storytellers. The Tlingit ancestors here in Alaska have been oral storytellers for many, many years. And at the Alaska Library, there is something called, I don't know if you can see this or not, It's called Tlingit Stories. I would recommend to anybody to read some of our stories because you'll understand us as a people throughout the stories of the raven, the eel. And so I would recommend any of our Tlingit myths. They get into the mind and the spirit of who we are as ancestral people here from Alaska. Thank you.
A couple of poets that I've really admired from back in the day till now are Janice Marikitani, and her poetry was very powerful and influential. I also really appreciate the poetry of Jessica Hagedorn, although I haven't seen things from her lately, but she's also so powerful. And I like Gil Scott Heron.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't know if there's a journal I'd recommend too. I don't know if you guys know about Bamboo Ridge Journal that comes out of Honolulu, but that's a great journal for poetry and short stories. And they feature a lot of the indigenous Hawaiians as well as, Hawaii's got so many different ethnicities, and all of that comes through in Bamboo Ridge Journal.
I guess for me, Sakiyama Tami, who's from Ishigaki and Irimote Islands, and then grew up in Koza on the main island, Okinawa. Her poetry her short stories have been super foundational for helping me think through the world. And I think when I was younger, Essex Hemphill, who is a gay black man from Philly, I think Philly. His short stories and his poetry are some of the most beautiful things I've read. So I can put those both in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah. And if all of you could add to the chat your suggestions or any links that you have. Well, one book on my mind that I think is underread is the NCRR book, the Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress book on the redress movement. It's not right on my desk at the moment, but it's around. I think that is a really amazing read, especially in this time when we're studying a lot about movements for reparations now. So that's something that I think is underread, underappreciated. Southland, yes. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Mia. Yeah, check that out. Teach that. And just before we go into sort of the last offering of a couple writing prompts, maybe we could just close with, let us know what is next for you all. What can we look forward to? What is something that is coming up for you, or maybe something that you would like to share for, as a suggestion for people to check out. There's so much virtual programming. There's so many ways to learn and to convene with other folks online. So if you have any suggestions, or if you want to share some things that are coming up for you.
I'd like to make a short announcement. The Little Tokyo Historical Society, in partnership with Discover Nikkei, sponsors Imagine Little Tokyo, a short story contest. And we have stories that capture the spirit, the sensibility, and the culture of Little Tokyo in 3 categories: adult, youth, and Japanese. And the award ceremony for the winners will be May 23rd, Sunday, May 23rd at 1 p.m. and through the JANM YouTube. And we really invite people to come. It's free. And we have, because theater has been suffering, we have theater actors this year that are reading the winning stories: Greg Watanabe, Julie Lee, and Eiji Inoue. And we invite you. And our MC is going to be Mike Palma, who's a ventriloquist comedian. Short stories are so wonderful and beautiful, as Mariko knows.
Let's see. I think I have a show coming up sometime in May, so that's happening there. But other than that, I would just definitely say to keep an eye out. There should be some stuff coming up this summer, but most of my writing recently has been more academic. So,
what about your spoken word group? Is that the show that you're? Is there a way for us to stay up with your spoken word group?
Yeah, I'm normally will on Instagram and Facebook bump the show and also the links. And TKK, I can send them to you if you would like to disseminate them to whomever. But yes.
In June 10th, I'll be sort of speaking or participating in a webinar entitled "If Only We Dare," an anti-Asian hate crime webinar that will be sponsored by the Harada House Foundation, the Museum of Riverside.
Will you be able to add that information into the chat, Curtis?
Yep.
Thank you. What was the date on that again?
June 10th at 6 p.m.
Paulette and I will be part of an event for the Japanese Canadian community for it's called Paurugai Dialogues, and it's part of the Powell Street Festival, which is the Japanese pre-war Japanese Canadian neighborhood in Vancouver. So we'll be having a conversation more about land and place and politics in a Japanese Canadian context. So it's an ongoing dialogue series. There's also one about ecology, I think, coming up. So yeah, the Powell Street Festival is a really amazing sort of like political Renaissance festival. Japanese Canadians lost most of their Japan towns, and so it's sort of their reconvening of space and community. So I'll drop the link to that dialogues, and I'm working on a poetry book, but who knows when that'll be out, but soon enough.
And you'll let us know, and we'll definitely want to share more of that at Nikkei Uncovered Poetry Column. Please do that. Amy, do you have?
I think I'm going to have a book out in 2022 called That Blue Trickster Time. So I'm hoping it'll be out. Yeah.
Tracy, to our respected audience, I would like to share that, yes, I'll be working with Sho in June on the land acknowledgement and the dialogue that will take place in the San Francisco area. I'm also writing my mother's story. She's 87, a very young 87, and a lot of harvesting for our people here, getting salmon and seaweed and halibut and berries, a lot of gathering throughout the summer. But I did want to take a moment here and acknowledge everybody who's present and everyone who has brought us together. But I think it's important that this is a land of over 500 indigenous tribes, indigenous peoples with unique ways of life. And to each and every one of you who have expressed your hurt and pain, we never gave anybody permission to mistreat you on our land. We never gave anybody permission to say the words they said, to kill the people they did, to write the policies they did. That is not who we are as Native people. And you, as people of my blood, also Japanese and Hispanic blood, we understand the beauty of our indigenous cultures. And I want to say that the pain and the joy that was expressed here, we celebrate the joy with you, and we stand with you arm in arm. We never gave anybody permission to hurt you, yesterday, today, or tomorrow on our indigenous lands. Thank you.
Whew. Paulette, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that meaningful sharing. That is amazing. Thank you. I can't see any other way but to flow from that point right there into a space for a little bit more an offering. These are two offerings. I don't really like having a space without giving folks room to write, because I think at poetry readings, but any kind of art convening, but definitely any kind of reading, we are all filled, right? I think everyone on this call would agree we are filled right now. I feel very amazingly full. And so sometimes we need places to put that. And I think that stirs up thought and inspiration. So I'm going to offer 2 writing prompts and exercises. We have a program that through our group Tuesday Night Project, we collaborate with the museum to every other month now. Our next one is June 9th. We have a program called Tea and Letter Writing. It started in person back in 2019, and then we went virtual as of last March. So we write letters to folks who are incarcerated members, who are in detention centers, who are being released, and to seniors isolated in Little Tokyo. So we are going to have some writing in June, on June 9th, in support of children, children who are in intake centers in Pomona and in Long Beach. So I really hope you'll join us. That'll be really special. But what we also do whenever we have these gatherings, we also bring people back together to do some creative writing. And a exercise that we continually come back to is a letter to our future self. So I offer that up to everybody in the audience to start a letter to your future self. I think Maya Worrell is still on the call and can give information about this thing called Future Me, I believe, where you can actually set a time for the letter to be sent back to you. So you can write this letter and have it sent to you a year from now, 5 years from now, you know, however long that site is around, right? But then you can also do what I suggest sometimes. You can literally stick it in the mail so that it's nice and sealed, have it mailed to you. And then once you get it, put it somewhere, hide it somewhere, and you'll find it later, so that you don't exactly know when in the future you will read it again. So again, it's just a letter to your future self. And the only thing that I add in these letters is to include questions. I think letters should always include questions. And then the second offering is a paired writing exercise. Something that I've been practicing for the past 2 decades in writing workshops with folks is to have people write together in groups of 3. It is a community building, team building, community organizing exercise. It is an ensemble building exercise. It really gives people a space. And Mariko, I encourage you, if you are not doing this already in your spoken word group, to use this exercise as a team. I practiced it every week with a spoken word group that I was in my 20s, and we would do a rotation. It's called rotation writing. So basically what you do, I'm going to explain this for writing in pairs, okay? And I'm going to explain this as if you're only going to be able to write virtually. So it's a little different when we're in person and you can write 3 poems simultaneously. by literally like passing around your journal clockwise, as you go. But I'm going to focus on a virtual version, since most of us are still doing virtual things. So you would open up a Google Doc. This is the way it's the most efficient, because then you can write in live time. Okay, so if you don't know how to use that, please look up how to use a Google Doc. It's very useful for writing and meeting with people and adjusting your notes. In this case, you're writing in live time. And so what you do is you think of a title or a theme as an offering. Each person does this, okay? And you start one piece, just pick one of those titles. You write it at the top of the page, and when you're on a Google Doc, you're seeing this document together. At least with the poets. Are you all familiar with Google Docs? Mia, Amy, everybody? Yeah, okay. No, yes, kind of. I'll explain it to you another time. But basically, you would go on this shared document. You would start with one theme or title at the top, and the person who chose the title will write that title. The other person will start the poem, and you write 2 lines. And then once that person is done writing their 2 lines, your partner will read those 2 lines and continue the verse. And you just write 2 lines, write 2 lines, write 2 lines, write 2 lines until you both naturally find an end to the piece. I think that it can be, people can feel isolated and alone when they think of writing. I think sometimes as writers, we sometimes idealize that writer sitting in a corner, all alone, hunched over their desk. And I don't think it has to be that way. I think that there is something about writing in community. Just as Mia and Amy are sharing a space as a group, there's a fruitfulness. And this is something that we practice a lot with our young folks in a Solidarity Arts Fellowship that our partner organization does, Vigilant Love. So, I share that with you. I really encourage you all to try that out. If you have questions about how to do it as a trio in live space, that's a whole other thing. And so you can reach out to me and I can explain that. But this is something fun that you can do virtually. You can do it, right now. So, Joy, do you have any, I just really want to say great thanks to Curtis, Mariko, Amy, Mia, Sho, and Paulette. Thank you so much for making the time and really bringing yourselves to this space.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. And it was nice meeting all of you.
Yes, it really
It really was nice meeting you.
Yes, thank you so much to all of you. And just really grateful to everyone for being here. And thank you, TKK, for your curation of such a wonderful lineup tonight.